The conditions will not improve by themselves. Only utter madness whispers that everything will fall into place of its own accord. That cannot happen. You cannot expect other people, and certainly not the Mahatmas, to take off your shoulder the task of making the necessary changes in your environment. Let us not lull ourselves with the idea that certain minds will solve the problems for everyone. People have become too accustomed to the idea that someone will do their thinking for them, and that the world is obligated to take care of them. But each one must bring in his own cooperation. We must not rely on the higher powers in the sense that we burden them with the whole workload. The one who relies on others is dead, but the one who follows is alive. We did not promise to transport dead bodies. We vouched to lead courageous followers. One must ponder very attentively in order to discern the boundary between courageous following and faint-hearted reliance. It was never said to burden everything on the Master. On the contrary, it was repeated, be imbued with the Master. There is a great difference between timid and inactive burdening on and imbuing the entire being with the consciousness of the Master. Hierarchy must not be burdened. This should be remembered by those who misunderstand service as loading everything on the Master and the hierarchy. All too easily we succumb to the temptation to remain idle and hope that higher providence will fix everything. This is a fallacy. Without the cooperation of us humans, nothing has ever been achieved on Earth. People attempt to preserve their lack of concern. They will say cunningly, if we have faith, the rest will follow. In this way, they create for themselves a lazy indifference. They will not be happy to hear that concern and constant striving are required. The best will always be rely on yourself and engage yourself to the limits of your strength. All who lead us have acted in the same way. In all worlds, it is best to rely upon one's own consciousness and strength. Despite being integrated into the hierarchy, a spiritual warrior must be able to act largely self-sufficiently. Instructions of the teacher may not always be available in every situation. It is needful for each one to walk self-reliantly. Say to each one, walk alone, until you receive the command of the teacher. Humanity must learn to realize self-reliantly all thoughts affirmed by the teacher. The view that hierarchy and self-sufficiency are incompatible is wrong. On the contrary, the principle of hierarchy requires that orders given are being executed self-reliantly. The Mahatmas cannot possibly take care of all the details themselves. They have to rely on their co-workers. To those who do not understand, hierarchy and self-reliance appear as contradictory concepts, whereas hierarchy requires precisely the development of self-reliance. He cannot approach hierarchy who does not understand self-reliance. On the steps of ascent, the first condition will be self-reliance and resourcefulness. Furthermore, it is not the task of the teacher to do that what is to be carried out by the disciple. It is bad when the concept of the teacher is not realized, but it is still worse when, after its realization, one burdens on the teacher what should be performed by oneself. It would be better to combine reverence for the teacher with the self-reliant application of one's own entire force. So let the co-worker first work independently before he calls for help. One should depend upon the assistance of hierarchy only when all one's self-acting ability has been strained. When we will train ourselves to sense the current of infinity, then people, instead of praying, will command the elements. Instead of God working for us, we, through our own labor and psychic energy, will help ourselves. The co-workers understand that self-reliance must be developed to the fullest. Before turning to the guide, each co-worker will first ask himself whether he can still accomplish something on his own. We had already mentioned, you can transfigure your possessions by handing them over in spirit to the hierarchy and managing them selflessly in trust in the name of the Mahatmas. In the same way, you can surrender your work to the top as well. Consecrate it to the hierarchy and dedicate it to serve the great plan. It should be remembered that all one's earthly labor can be dedicated to the supermundane world. May each one labor in the name of the supermundane world. Then you are laboring in the name of the brotherhood. You will sign each of your deeds, so to speak, on behalf of the hierarchy. You are no longer working for yourselves, but for the good of the world, for the progress of evolution. Labor may be of four kinds. Toil with repulsion, which leads to decomposition. Unconscious toil, which does not strengthen the spirit. toil devoted and loving, which yields a good harvest. And finally, toil which is not only conscious, but also consecrated under the light of hierarchy. Any work, even the simplest, the lowest, and seemingly most boring, can mean worshipping God, if only it has been commissioned by your master and serves the realization of his aims. Labor may be regarded as a victory over everyday routine. Each hard-working man is a benefactor of humanity. The most wretched being can find the access to infinity, for each labor of quality opens the locks. Any work which you manage to shape as a step towards this high goal will be a feast. Only a free consciousness can transform labor into a festival of the spirit. Any necessary work can be done joyfully, even if it seems boring and unpleasant. Why? Because if it is necessary, it helps to establish the rule of the Spirit on earth. Because if it is necessary, your master has sent you to perform it. Because if it is necessary, it has to be done. That is, if you do not carry it out, someone else would have to do it. Because if it is necessary, you have taken this load off the shoulders of your master. He who performs the most wearisome labor most joyously will be the resolute victor, for he overcomes the burden of boredom. If our daily labor is consecrated in the name of the teacher, it cannot be ordinary or tiresome. If we forget for what we labor, boredom will cover us with its shroud of decay, and all the jesters of the world will not be able to provoke a smile in us. To dedicate itself to the service of a high goal is the real meaning, the mission, the fulfillment, and the highest joy of every human life. All men of goodwill are longing to make their forces available to the service of a great cause. A yogi feels his destination in bringing service to the world. Great service can be the lot of every man. New life is poured into him who dares to toil in great service. Each one defines his entrance himself. Each one may pledge himself, not to small, but to great service, and thus irrevocably dedicate himself to the higher world. Thus, great service is a duty and an honor. The principle of service brings about a true transfiguration, of your entire existence. It was the loss of this concept of service that turned earthly life into slavery and insanity. The concept of service is the solution of the tasks of life. The actual existence of your higher being, your soul, is indeed proved by the fact that you are unhappy and suffer when you are unable to find a way to apply your abilities to a higher purpose. A frightful emptiness appears, as it were, when there is no application of one's forces for common good. Without great service, life itself, like a wilting blossom, loses its meaning. As for those who do not consciously apply the most important energies, their failure will give rise to harmful results, not only for themselves, but for everyone else as well. The spiritual man, the warrior, the saint, and the artist, they all dedicate their lives to the realization of an ideal. Truth, justice, freedom, beauty, humanity, and today immortality, rule of the spirit, or progress of the evolution. When the spirit understands that service to cosmos means bringing into life the higher principles, it strains its best levers. By realizing the principles of the higher world, we approach the material level to the spiritual spheres. Service can be a miraculous bridge between the worlds. To participate in this service is the true adventure of a time and of a life, the liberation from the monotonous, grey, everyday life. The full understanding of service dispels the atmosphere of the commonplace and leads to the harmony necessary for the fulfillment of one's tasks. There is so much beauty and joy in a life dedicated to cooperation with the forces of light for the general good. And, first of all, this joy is a result of a great liberation from the attachment to the trifles of life. Service, in the name of a powerful achievement, bestows beauty upon existence. If, on the other hand, you promote the small, selfish, personal concerns of individual people, you are not on the spiritual path, and your work is without value. Service is not in furthering ordinary well-being, but in bringing benefit to humanity. Strive to the guiding thought about help to humanity. Think clearly that you are performing not a personal act, nor a group act, but an absolutely useful act. That becomes a labor for the unification of the worlds.